Well, welcome. I am delighted to be here again in Turin. Your famous countryman, Umberto Eco, has suggested that we have had 8,000 years of a text-based civilization, and now, I suppose, since the late 1980s, we're due for a change. And his argument would be that the text masters now decidedly have to move aside and create a space for the image masters, and also nowadays, of course, the image mistresses.
Unfortunately, the cinema we've had for so long is not really a medium of images, because every film you've seen and every film I've seen always starts life with a text. So the basic people who work in cinema are text people, they're not image people. And I think we've seen it. I think certainly, probably in the last 20 years, cinema has become very miserable. And despite all the attempts, to attract with new technologies and gimmicks and so on, I believe there's still essentially something missing now. But I don't worry about it because, cinema's had a long innings. It's about time it disappeared, and I would cry no tears for the disappearance of cinema. What we're doing now is so much more exciting. And it's involved in a much more egalitarian and less elitist situation, because we can all do it now, as I suggest. Everybody's got a mobile phone, everybody's got a laptop, and probably everybody's a camera recorder.
Okay, well, what we'd like to do then tonight is to present you with 4 pieces of, I suppose we could call them film. They're recognizably cinematic by nature, but they're beginning to break out, should we say, of the notion of the cinematic box.
How do you think about the story to tell through those paintings and to reproduce through lights and sound and so?
Well, there are a whole series of ironies and contradictions here. I complain that cinema is too close to the bookshop. But if you think about the whole history of painting, it has always been very literary. And it wasn't until probably the 1860s with the Impressionists that we finally dropped the text. That, I think, was absolutely necessary because that means we have an entrance into the whole 20th century. And suddenly painting took off, whereas before it was mimetic and imitative and narrative. My big ambition now is to get rid of narrative in the cinema, but people hold their hands up in horror because I think most people go to the cinema to be told a story.
I've often been asked, what do you think Mr. Rembrandt would have thought about what we were doing?
This evening you say that one of your next work will be on Guernica and some other paintings. So what do you think to do about them and with them?
Well, what we've done is we've selected 9 paintings. There are hundreds of paintings I could have selected. But if I'm not careful, I shall be doing this the rest of my life. And you can see I don't have much life left. So we have concentrated really on what I think is 9 really essential paintings which have changed the way we've looked at the world. And each one I got to tackle differently. You can see what we did with Leonardo da Vinci. You can't treat Jackson Pollock that way, so you're going to find some other way to do it.
Actually make the notion of cinema and television a totally architectural experience.
One of your most famous quotation is that cinema is that for you, and also television, but we are in a radio and television events.
I would call it, we're now in the age of the screen. And the screen, can be this thing in my pocket, or it can indeed be the biggest television screen you could find. But I hope much more, to do with notions of environmental phenomenon. How many television sets do you have in your house? So it's the proliferation of the screens has a big, qualitative effect as well as a quantitative effect on the way that we make a perception of these things. I proselytize. I have a missionary obligation, I think, as a cinema maker, to develop ideas of visual literacy. And most people are visually illiterate. Well, all the experiences would not really be particularly televisual because I still don't think people have understood what television is. Bazin, famous Belgian, French apologist for cinema way back in the 1920s, said that cinema was a combination of literature, the theatre, and painting. There's a very precious little painting, but there's an awful lot of theatre, and there's a huge amount of literature. And I think you know, how long has television been going? It's been really going, I suppose, since, what shall we say, in the West, certainly in America, I suppose, it's been going essentially to the early 1980s, I think. Okay, television existed before then, but it wasn't until about 1983 that the notion of the zapper and the remote control, and, you know, we organized our sitting rooms to all face the television. So it hasn't been going very long, has it? You know, we're talking about 8,000 years of painting, which is a long time to develop. Things go faster and faster and faster. But I think we should concern ourselves really not to make television literature, not to make television theatre. I would like it to be more visual, but I can't expect people to be very sophisticated in terms of painting. So I still really think we're looking for an autonomy here. But the sad thing is, the actual quality and the content is constantly going down and down and down and down. And I think, you know, intelligent people, even halfway intelligent people, even people with a curiosity, are simply not looking at it. I live in Amsterdam, in Holland, and the statistic for people going to the cinema in Holland is very bad. They say the average Dutch citizen only goes and sees a film once every 2 years, and young people are not looking at television anymore. They're communicating through laptops and screens, but they're not watching broadcast television.